Consumerism Introduction. Hello, students. In this session, we are going to learn about consumerism as a threat to our nation. Let us start by having a detailed study about consumerism. Now, students, do you know what is consumerism? Consumerism is an organized movement of citizens and government to strengthen the rights and power of buyers in relation to sellers. Consumerism refers to the wide range of activities of government, business, and independent organizations designed to protect rights of the consumers. Consumerism, in other words, is a collective consciousness on the part of consumers, business, government, and civil society which enhances consumer satisfaction and social welfare, which will in turn benefit all citizens, finally make the society a better place to live in. But you may ask, what is the need for such a movement, consumerism? The answer is, consumers are exposed to many hazardous physical and environmental exploitation due to unfair trade practices. We consumers need protection against products which are unsafe for consumption, such as drugs, unadulterated food products, and products which may cause injury, such as defective electrical appliances. None of us would be cheated. Thus, we consumers as a whole need protection against malpractices and deceit by sellers. For example, everyone would have heard of our close friend or relative lamenting about instances they got cheated on quality or unworthy products. This is why we as consumers should have adequate rights and right to recourse measures against defaulting businessmen. We should also know to implement them. In our Indian system, the consumer has 6 rights established for protection from exploitation from the shopkeepers or sellers. Consumer exploitation means mistreatment or cheating of consumer by adulteration or in any other unfair form. To prevent consumer from exploitation, our government has passed many acts from time to time. Some of them are as follows. First, Drug and Cosmetics Act 1940. Second, Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954. Third, Essential Commodity Supply Act 1955. Fourth, Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969. Fifth, Standard of Weights and Measures Act 1976. Sixth, Consumer Protection Act 1986. Let's have a detailed study on the changing trends in consumerism until the present day. We'll also analyze if consumerism is indeed an important social issue. We shall study about the environmental and social problems linked to consumerism, and finally we shall suggest a solution to overcome the ill effects of consumerism. The changing consumerism. We may say consumerism has taken a lot of transitions from the earlier years. As India moves from a production-oriented mixed economy to a consumer society, there is a need to understand the forces behind this transition. Although India remains in the bottom half of the world economies, there is every reason to believe that this is not likely to last long. For many structural changes are evident, including the transformation of the middle class, which is at vanguard of the consumer revolution. Part of the rising consumerism in India may be cast in the general context of global tendencies in consumerism. The global diffusion of consumerism has been aided by the expansion of multinationals, the diffusion of telecommunication and satellite technologies, the general dissatisfaction with socialist political regimes, and rising economic success in East Asian countries. Certainly, recent moves in India echo these developments. Consumerism is in fact an international phenomenon. People purchasing goods and consuming materials in excess of their basic needs is as old as the first civilizations. Some new technologies in India are diffusing faster than some old technologies. So, One cannot use the historical progression of the West as a model to study India. A large part of consumerism depends on advertising. A second aspect of consumerism discourse relates to the everyday patterns of behavior one expects to find in consumerism or commercialism. In India, there is a bargaining of consumer related articles from branding to lifestyles to fashion and popular media. Newspapers have regular columns devoted to these matters. A number of magazines have appeared in the area of advertising, business, women's fashion that constantly discusses these issues. Much of Indian consumerism is directly dependent on what goes on in feature films and the movie industry in a country where the celebrities used to be politicians and public figures. They have been gradually replaced by movie actors and actresses and business celebrities. Thus, the discourse of consumerism can be seen in media, movies, and other entertainment forms. One can, of course, venture an explanation to the Indians' adaptation of modern consumer technologies in terms of class ideology and consumption styles. This is our constant urges to visit a posh restaurant or eateries for a family or social gathering. This has changed the course of consumer demands on food intake. And another effect of this modernized food habit is the drastic health conditions. Medical consumption comes into play. Nowadays, when we get bored at home and we aren't in a mood to watch TV, listen to music, chat with parents, all that comes to our mind is shopping. Well, that is a modern day Indian. Let us be careful about the words we use. Modern day Indian, not a modern day youngster. Because the consumerism bug has struck without any discrimination of age, gender, and family status, and it is here to stay. Today, window shopping is a hobby. Buying the latest mobile phone before anyone else does it is a passion. And buying a pair of jeans to save ourselves from getting bored is a common happening. It tends to increase our mental satisfaction. More dresses, more shoes, more perfumes. I'm happy. MNCs are happy, the whole world is happy. In between all this world of happiness, there is a very small problem. We are becoming materialistic. We believe that relationships can be materialistic. We are becoming commodities. We are falling to the trap of consumerism and spending sleepless nights thinking about our unbought iPod and how badly we are losing out to our neighbor who has the latest model. Yes, if we don't have something which our neighbors, friends, and relatives have, we are losing out. This seems to be the common advertiser's motto. The advertisers try luring us by introducing new stuff and we end up buying just for the sake of it. No matter if we really need it or not. If we manage to buy the latest version of Android phone, we are considered superior among our peers, and here is what scares me. Is it really worth being competitive about commodities? Are we losing out on mental peace and happiness thinking about losing out in this consumerist race? Are we loving people because they have a sleek sports car and not loving someone because he travels in a local train? These questions need to be answered because if we do, we are not ready for consumerism to invade us. We are risking ourselves for being hit hard by the ill effects that it can bring to society at large. Let's not be slaves to it. Let's give it a serious thought. This is the modern day scenario of consumerism, where it has evolved from dire necessity in the past to leisure activity in the present. Is consumerism an important social problem? If someone asked me such a question, my answer would definitely be yes, it is. As we have already seen, consumerism nowadays refers to buying stuff just for the sake of passion, then considering its utility. This is, of course, an unhealthy practice. Let alone buying, the proper term would be following. We follow our celebrities, our superstars for their hairdo, six-pack abs, for facial features and whatnot. Most of us are ready to opt for a cosmetic surgery to imitate our idols. We go out to movies every weekend, never miss out a single episode of our favorite show. All these collectively results in us shelling out comparatively large amounts of money. Let us again put it this way: we earn all throughout the year, spend it on the name of recreation, leisure, and luxury after saving a little for the basic needs. Do we possibly have any other reason to earn? For instance, let us take the example of the famous, I would like to call it infamous sports, as sports contribute next to nothing to communities economically, yet they are eating away public money that could be better spent on parks, schools, and public services. The other aspect of consumerism is that it is very addictive. As a consumer, we always want to buy more. This process never ceases, this leading to what is called overconsumption. Anything that is consumed in excess would prove to be dangerous. This could even be fatal at times. When we consider food sector, the latest fad is the uprise of junk food. Imagine a condition where the world survives on junk like pizzas and burgers. This not only fuels the demand for such eateries, in turn, consumerism. It also leads to obesity. Obesity is very common among younger group nowadays. It also leads to heart and bone related problems, development of tumor, diabetics at young age, and gastro problems. But consumerism has taken its part here also. For example, a population where health is generally getting worse may result in more sales of medicines or a growth in private healthcare and other knock on industries. Instead of these always being seen as a cost, they are seen as providing more jobs and creating wealth. And as a result, it counts towards GDP and other indicators of economic health. It then looks like the economy is dealing with this fine without realizing that even more resources are used to support these jobs and industries that may not be needed in as much intensity. It is easy to blame consumers from wealthy countries as the sole cause of these problems elsewhere through. The mass consumerism culture has not been based solely on natural demand, but a created demand. And we consumers are ourselves the sufferers. This consumerism is very important social problem at a global level. It seems to be an inevitable part of today's world as the times are not same as that of the olden days. We'll study more about the problems contributed by consumerism in the next few sessions. Environmental problems linked to consumerism. Let's start this section with an example. There was once a large playground just beside a multi-cuisine restaurant, which was a public creation location. As time passed by, the total area of the ground diminished as it turned out to be a dump site for the restaurant. People no longer took interest to go to a playground turned dump yard. In the following years, the dump yard no longer consisted of waste from restaurant but also from that deposited by the entire locality. This is the story of invariably every dump site we find on Indian streets. Do you know the sole reason for this? The answer is a simple word: consumerism. Pollution is related to increased consumption. That is, the consumption itself plus the production and waste of products used in consumption. Automobiles are a clear example. Other examples include industrial waste, especially when it is just dumped into the rivers and oceans. Waste from the tourist industry, including cruise liners, air travel, etc. Waste from industrial agriculture, consumer waste such as household waste, excessive product packaging, our throwaway culture, and so on. The developed countries have the tendency to tax workers in developing countries to meet their consumption level. 86% of the world's resources are consumed by the world's wealthiest 20%. In other words, someone has to pay our consumption levels. Example, we can consider a simple case of agriculture industry. Someone in some part of Nagpur is busy planting oranges for us to consume. This phenomenon applies for all sectors. Another trend is to also export waste to other regions of the world. As one example, hazardous electronic waste such as old computers, old computer monitors, etc., primarily from wealthier nations, are also being exported to places like China, India, and Pakistan, where they are processed in operations that are extremely harmful to human health and the environment. But do you know what happens to people living there? The minimal or non existent environmental and working standards and regulations, old technologies for recycling and processing, etc., puts a lot of people and surrounding environment at risk due to the sheer amount of waste to be processed. This is an unmindful act of the developed countries to induce an outbreak of ailments in developing nations where the wastes are being processed. Another impact on environment is the misuse of land. Land area that doesn't meet and satisfy the basic requirements of people is said to be misused land. For example, we all would have visited KFC and Pizza Hut, isn't it? But these junk food chains are under attack from major environmental groups because of their environmental impact. Intensive breeding of livestock and poultry for such restaurants lead to deforestation, land degradation, and contamination of water resources and other natural resources. Did you know? For every pound of red meat, poultry, eggs, and milk produced, farm fields lose about 5 pounds of irreplaceable topsoil. The water necessary for meat breeding comes to about 190 gallons per animal per day, or 10 times what a normal Indian family is supposed to use in one day if it gets water at all. In addition to these, economic policies of the wealthier nations and their consumption demands mean that more land is therefore used to grow cash crops, which are crops like bananas, sugar, coffee, tea, etc., for export to wealthier countries, primarily, while other land is diverted for non productive uses like growing tobacco, flowers, etc. Additional land is also cleared and used to grow things like cattle for beef exports. In the quantities that some of the products of these exports are consumed, a lot of this production is wasteful and unnecessary. The cost to the environment and local population is borne not by the consumers of the product but local people instead. These economic policies that encourage this pattern are often imposed upon the poorer nations, and because food is a commodity, those who can afford to pay will get food. When the best agricultural land is used up to produce these cash crops, more marginal land is used for food and subsistence farming. This can also lead to clearing parts of forests or other forms of encroachment on other ecosystems. We all know what deforestation could lead to, isn't it? Social costs of consumerism. Consumerism not only damages our environment, it also affects the livelihood of people. The poorer sections are severely affected. By this, I do mean to say that the wealthier are safe. The rich people face the effect of overconsumption. This is equally as devastation as lower consumption. The poorer people have to face the socially neglected scenario, where the rich usually suffer from obesity due to overconsumption, which is an inevitable condition in the present day world. Let us study more about the various social issues and its costs in this section. We can say consumerism sets each person against himself in an endless quest for the attainment of materialistic things or the imaginary world conjured up and made possible by things yet to be purchased. Weight training, cosmetic surgery, permanent eye makeup, collagen injections. These are some examples of people turning themselves into human consumer goods, more suited for the marketplace than living in a healthy, balanced society. According to a survey by National Geographic, the consumer class is about 1.7 billion, with about half of this number coming from developing countries. Experts on this issue blame the problems we have in the environment on our consumerism. The unprecedented consumer appetite is undermining the natural systems we all depend on and making it even harder for the world's poor to meet their basic needs. Because industrial agriculture is using more monocultures, rather than a diversity of crops. The loss of biodiversity is leading to more resource usage. This, as well as other political situations such as the motives for dumping surplus food onto developing countries to undersell the local farmers, leads to further hunger around the world. As land ownership has become more concentrated in the hands of fewer owners, larger companies, larger agri businesses, etc., and as things like food dumping mentioned above, increases hunger and drives rural workers out of jobs. There is an increase in urban migrations as people move to the cities in hope for a better chance. This then places additional stress on the larger cities to provide for more people. It also results in more slum areas, health problems, increasing crime, overcrowding, and so on. But cities aren't the only places that the landless move to. Some, being pushed off their own lands, will move to less arable land to hope to farm that, which may conflict with wildlife. In other cases, others may move into forested areas, clearing them with the hope to make a living from farming that cleared land. Destruction of old forests, in particular, can also mean loss of habitat for many wildlife. In yet other cases, many may try to immigrate to other parts of the world if they feel there is no choice left in their own country. In yet another situations, economic growth can also lead to more urban migrations. Sometimes this growth of cities can go in hand with decline in the rural areas. Due to these and a multitude of other complex socio-economic and political factors in different parts of the world, there are different proportions of people in urban and rural areas. It is estimated that 37% of species could become extinct due to climate change, which is very directly related to consumption. How else could it worsen if these species are going to be extinct due to climatic changes? Do you think man alone could manage to continue with an undistributed life? Remedial measures. After learning about these entire problems, we surely feel the need to find immediate solutions to all these issues. We know that consumerism is generated entirely by humans and creates many problems on earth. When we spend large amounts in advertising and promoting must have products, the drive to have these items grows significantly. Our human desire to follow trends and to keep up with the latest fashion, along with having all the newest gadget, makes our environment pay the price, and it is a large price. We can no longer accept the normality of living, and now the only way to live is by having more than a person next to us, and we don't even think twice about it. Globalization is another issue that ties into consumerism. With all the advances these days, we all need the latest and greatest features. Everything that used to be a luxury is now a necessity. Television, cell phones, and air conditioning are all very common things now that to create some people are extreme necessities. Some of these necessities are extremely dramatic. In the recent survey, it is seen that even with the big screen, TVCs, SUVs, and eating out way more, and are no more happy than we were 50 years ago without all of this stuff. We may even be less happy in a more materialistic world today. With all these complexities, we really do not need something called consumerism, do we? It's difficult to escape consumerism. Commercials and glossy print ads intoxicate us with the images of high-end products like widescreen TVs, luxury cars, and latest electronic gadgets. Their unspoken message equates possessions with happiness. The problem with consumerism is it leads to bad spending habits and debt. The more obvious way to put an end to consumerism could be urged to all the wealthy people in the world to stop consuming so much. This is possible by putting a lot more emphasis on sentimental values of item than measuring the quantity of items. I would like to mention some easy ways that could be followed by us so as to stop being a mindless consumer. Reduce exposure to advertising by spending less time watching commercials, looking at ads in magazines, and surfing the internet. Focus on the true significance of holidays rather than how much you spend. A thoughtful gestures, small meaningful gift or note goes a long way without hurting the pocketbook. Identify the areas where you overspend, particularly if you are spending to feel better. If you find yourself cruising the mall every week when you already have a closet full of clothes, seek out other leisurely activities like reading books instead. Cut back on buying the latest model of electronics, cars, and other high tickets items when what you have works just fine. Steer clear of stores if you are an impulse buyer or easily swayed by what your friends are buying. Create a budget and take control of your spending. Analyze your credit card and checking account statements to see how you spend your money each month. Set savings goals and take pride in how much you save rather than what material possessions you have. Use savings to buy big ticket items and borrow less money. Conclusion. In the first session, we saw the meaning of consumerism, how it has evolved, and its changing courses in the modern world. We realized how the notion of people has changed from buying necessity to luxury and status. In the second session, we analyzed if consumerism was indeed a social problem. We studied how consumerism is seen as a potential threat in modernized society. In the third session, we dealt with the environmental costs of consumerism. Dumping of waste into poor nations, misuse of land was seen as major issues. These even prompt deforestation. In the fourth sessions, we saw how the people in developing nation had to suffer the social issues related to consumerism. We learn about immigration and shifting of people from rural to urban areas. Finally, in the last session, we sought remedies to overcome the ill effects of consumerism. The best way is to avoid being an avid consumer.